Joined on the phone by senior handicapper at Racing and Sports, Adam Blencowe. Adam, firstly, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on.
For the viewers at home, can you briefly tell us what it is you do at Racing and Sports?
Yeah, so I work here at Racing and Sports, and I suppose my main role is to work with the different rating models that we have here, rating horses and ranking horses, and then hopefully using those rankings and ratings to make forecasts and punt with and make a dollar, but also a little bit of writing about what those models produce and the different ratings that they produce. Yeah.
Exciting times at the moment, and especially for Kiwi horses heading over to Australia. You recently wrote an article on Racing and Sports about that. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I did notice I wrote that up on Racing and Sports there, so you can check that out. But I noticed that there was, the same trend in New Zealand at the moment that we're seeing in Australia, which is that the 3-year-old group is really strong. So been seeing that in Australia pretty much since day one this season. 1st of August, we just started to notice that the 3-year-old races were spitting out fast times and good-looking form, and very quickly we got to see them taking on the older horses and beating them a little bit as well. Loving Gabby won a Manicato down here. We've seen Alabama Express come back and win an All here the other day and stand out win an Expressway. So we've seen that 3-year-old form blend into the older horses and basically repeat what we were seeing in their own group there, where we were seeing, as I said, fast times. And we were noticing that over in New Zealand as well. And I think we're starting to see, Catalyst is the obvious. He's been a superstar over there for you guys, and he's run great ratings and, one of the better 3-year-olds that has been, racing in New Zealand in recent years. And really looking forward to seeing him in Melbourne on tomorrow, actually. So that's going to be fantastic, and convinced that he'll measure right up to our good ones. But it's not just him. There's depth to the crop there, and I think Tua Illicit on the weekend when she won the Waikato Guineas was the real sit up and take notice moment, if you like. That there's more than just Catalyst over there. There's really good depth to this crop. Her performance was outstanding, and she looks well up to the level to sort of come to Australia and measure up. And I doubt that she's the only one. We've already seen Probabeel run to much the same level over here. So we've seen a little bit of that form already dancing across the Tasman, and we expect it to continue.
And speaking of the 3-year-olds and the star Catalyst, he's currently rated 119 with the time form rating, as well as the Alligator Blood at 118. We just had a look at the time form ratings. Have they reached that level, or in your opinion, do you think that they can improve their scope a little bit more?
Yeah, I would be surprised if they don't both improve, and particularly Catalyst. A lot of what Catalyst has done has come with the impression that there's going to be plenty more to come from him, and really tomorrow we get to see him against Alligator Blood there with a really good horse to run at. So it'll be fascinating to see how high he can go and what sort of level he can go when there's one there to really drag the best out of him. And I think tomorrow it looks a big ask for him. So there's not a lot of speed in that race there tomorrow, and Alligator Blood looks like getting a very cheap time up on the pace there. Catalyst will probably be spotting him a start and have to run him down. Also gives him a kilo there as well. So a big task to run down a horse like Alligator Blood. Is in fantastic form. He ran a really fast time winning up at the Gold Coast last time. He was terrific in the spring, and he's only gone on in leaps and bounds since then. So yeah, I would be surprised if 119 is the best that we see out of Catalyst. I'd be surprised if 118 is the best we see out of Alligator Blood. And so their clashes, hopefully there's 2 or 3 of them in the next month or so. They're going to be really fascinating. My slight lean would be to Catalyst in the long term. I think he'll prove the better horse. But as I said, I think the setup tomorrow's tricky for him. I think if he can gun down Alligator Blood tomorrow, he'll have to run a really big figure, and I think it'll set him up to be one of the, he's already the big dog in New Zealand. I think it'll set him up to be the real superstar 3-year-old, certainly over a mile anyway in Australia as well.
From what you've seen, do you think Catalyst will produce his best runs over the mile where he's set to target?
Yeah, I think so. At the same time, he's not lacking pace for 1400, and we saw him reel off awesome sectionals and awesome overall figures over 1200 as well. So I don't think he necessarily needs a mile. As I said, I think he's got plenty of pace for trips short of a mile, but he's got obviously no trouble staying a mile, and that's where the best races for him probably sit over here. So if I know they're looking at an all-star mile for the big check there, and there's also races like the Doncaster, which are great 3-year-old races anyway. They get really well placed in Doncaster's 3-year-olds, and he'd be that'd be a terrific race for him to target on the back of that All-Star Mile. So it does look like, even if he doesn't necessarily need a mile, it does look like his biggest grand finals are going to be over that trip, and there's certainly nothing in his figures that say that he doesn't, and that he won't produce his absolute best over a mile. So yeah, I'd happily sort of throw him into the miler camp at this point.
Speaking of another All-Star Mile nominee is Melody Bell. How do you expect her to measure up, and where does she measure up in the time form ratings?
Yeah, so she's one of the best mares to. Well, you know this better than me. She's one of the best mares to race in New Zealand in the last sort of half a dozen years, maybe even stretching a little bit further back than that. And she's rated 118, so she's probably, horses like Catalyst and Co. They might be able to sort of leapfrog her, and Tiaka Shark's the sort of highest rated horse in New Zealand at the moment, and he's at 126, so he's a long way clear of her. But she's a mare, so she always gets her mare's allowance there, and what she is just rock solid at that 118. So where the others might fluctuate towards bigger peaks, she's just rock solid around 118, and we know she's that good. She's done it in both countries. She was fantastic here in the springtime there, and she was terrific, obviously winning the mile, the good mare's mile on Derby Day there. I think she was even better when she backed up a week later, and she was unlucky, in my opinion, not to back up and win the McKinnon. She was left with a lot to do, and she was left with a really game mare in Magic Wand to run down. It's hard to run down those big, tough Galileo mares from Ireland, and she gave her a big head start. Her sectionals were fantastic, running as close as she did, and that gives us a real global look at her form as well. So we know that 118 now sort of stretches beyond New Zealand, beyond Australia as well. Magic Wand's been here, there and everywhere. So we've got a really good idea, of where she sits, and it's really great to get those little form references as well. So confident in where she sits, and she's so reliable that, we can pretty much expect her to run around that level wherever she goes.
And sticking with the Tiakau theme, Tiakau Shark is one of 4 horses in the last 5 years to break the 120 barrier on New Zealand soil. How does his winning run at Te Rapa rate? Yeah,
so he ran 121 first up there, which is pretty ominous. It's below his absolute best, but no one was expecting him to be at his best first up over 1400 there. But 121 first up for him is pretty ominous. He obviously missed last autumn, so when he resumed in the spring, he was off a longer break, and his first 2 runs were a little bit rustier than that, but he pretty quickly came good and hit his absolute peak there in the Epsom. He was awesome in the Epsom alongside Colding. That's a great form line. He gave him weight. They ran fantastic time, and then didn't quite match it ratings-wise, but the scenario sort of played against him a little bit in the Cox Plate, but he was fantastic again there. He was certainly clear of 120 again there, and that's, again, we've got another great global form line to work with there. So he's a real top liner. Over a mile, there's maybe even a mile and a quarter. There's not really, certainly an older horse to match him in Australia or New Zealand at the moment. So he can pretty much go to whatever race he'd like to go to. And as I said, that's a big ominous start for him. So I'm expecting he's going to be pretty close to that 126 again next time. I think he's coming across for the Chipping Norton first and foremost, and then he'll probably head on to a George Ryder and a Queen Elizabeth. And I think the All-Star Mile's probably taken some of the gloss off the Chipping Norton. It might be a bit of a cheap one for him, so I'd expect him to be a pretty dominant favourite there, and then head on towards the George Ryder and the Queen Elizabeth, which are just 2 of the hottest races we've got. But I would think that certainly from the older horses, he's going to be as good as we can put up at this stage against these 3-year-olds. But the 3-year-olds are going to be really, really interesting in those races, and I think that's pretty much what Tiaka Shark's got to worry about.
He's Total of Future's favourite for the Chipping Norton. Is it an overreaction by the bookies? Would you have him a little bit longer?
Well, hard to say. There's probably a lot of percentage in those markets. So, I'm always sitting on the betting side of these things, so I think they should have everything longer. But at the same time, I'd say he certainly deserves his place up there. And as I said, there's got to be question marks on a lot of horses going there, because we've got the All-Star Mile, which is sort of a vote-in sort of thing. So everyone's sort of got to keep their plans up in the air a little bit. Most people want to run in the All-Star Mile, but they've got to sort of sit back and wait to see if they can get a spot there. And obviously the Chipping Norton sort of becomes the default option for a few if they don't get a spot in the All-Star Mile. So the makeup of that field will be interesting. If you know Tiaka Shark's going there, I suppose that's a big tick in his corner, and you know that he's absolutely good enough to win it. He's good enough to win it even if it turned into a strong Chipping Norton, but he's probably a dominant favourite if it turns out to be a bit of a thin Chipping Norton, which is potentially the case.
He was a third in behind Le Grosso in the Cox Plate. Now, she's rated 126 plus. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I think she's rated actually a little bit higher than that now because she put that plus to work when she went back to New Zealand. She's a terrific mare. So that performance there, we think she was probably a little bit better than the performance on the day. It was a tricky one to rate. She put a big hole in them there. And I think some of the run-on horses like Tiaka Shark were probably a little bit disadvantaged by the way that the race set up. So that was the plus was sort of suggesting that maybe she could be a little bit better than that rating and that we maybe undersold the performance somewhat. And I think she probably proved that right. She went straight back to Japan and won the Aramakinan, which is their just about their biggest race over there. I think many would tell you that it is their biggest race over there. And she hammered a world-class field of the best horses basically that Japan can offer in that race. So I think she was rated 129 when she won the Aramakinan, just a month on from that. So that was pretty much what the plus was saying, is that she was probably a little bit better than that result.
So to summarise there, is it fair to say that we think the Kiwis are going to be pretty dominant in this carnival?
Yeah, I think so. I'm very wary of them. I'm thinking that they're going to have a big time of it. I think Two Illicit and Probabile are both fillies that are right up to winning they've already got form. Two Illicit's winning the Waikato Guineas was awesome. I think she's already good enough to win races like the Viner in the Oaks. And we know New Zealand fillies are brilliant in those races anyway. Probabile's been over here and measured up to Funstar, who's the best middle distance filly. And then we've got Catalyst and Tiaka Shark, who look potentially the best horses in their respective divisions. So yeah, it really is shaping as a big 6 months for the Kiwis, in Sydney, and then there's always the late burners in Brisbane as well. So there's probably a few more hiding over there to be worried about as well. So yeah, I'm thinking a big 6 months for the Kiwis.